I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. Everybody say, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? It's my girl.
No.
My
We're
girl.
a day late, Keith. It is Saturday, the 17th of September. That was the week. Was it a sunny week or a dark week? Sunny week for Spurs this morning. Sonny just scored 3 goals in 10 minutes, having been dropped. Maybe we need to drop people more often and they'll come back and deliver. You juxtapose TikTok and Twitter this week. You suggest that Twitter is getting favorable home treatment. Is that right?
Well, I don't know about if it's getting favorable, but TikTok's definitely getting unfavorable treatment. The juxtaposition is the whistleblower came to DC and actually did a very thorough job of exposing
the Twitter whistleblower.
The Twitter whistleblower.
You talk about the whistleblower as if there's just one. There are many. It's a good job these days. If you become a whistleblower, you probably get your travel paid to go to DC and talk to some old man, right?
I think he got like a $7 million payoff, I read somewhere, but it didn't stop him talking. And Elon Musk is leveraging him in the case to get out of buying Twitter. So that whole thing happened. But when you drill into it, and some of the coverage that I put in the newsletter this week drills into it, Twitter's internal regime when it comes to data controls is just terrible. The same week, all of the social media execs showed up in DC to be questioned. One of them was the American COO of TikTok, and she was drilled on whether TikTok is basically exposing American information to Chinese Communist Party members, and did a really good job.
Yeah, but from Josh Hawley, who's hardly an objective commentator or questioner. We know what he thinks before he even opens his ugly mouth.
And then it was exposed that Facebook is paying a GOP marketing house. The firm is called Targeted Victory. Washington Post reported that Facebook has been paying them large amounts of money to start an anti-TikTok propaganda campaign focused on the threat to American children represented by this Chinese-owned company. So there's a lot of dirty...
Well, that's hardly surprising given Facebook's own dirty record. So putting it very briefly, Keith, what are the issues? I mean, aside from the issue of whether Musk is being forced to buy Twitter, and that whistleblower element, what are the concerns of Congress when it comes to these social media companies?
The main concern, well, firstly, I don't think there are any real concerns. I think Congress is largely preoccupied with.
Then this whole conversation's moot. They got brought to Washington to talk. What are they being asked about?
They're being asked about how they deal with user data, privacy related stuff. In the case of TikTok, it's foreign enemy use of user data. In the case of Facebook, it's homegrown. So it's domestic versus foreign, in quotes, terrorism. And we're 8 weeks away from the midterms. It's senators and representatives trying to get a platform for their own point of view as well. So social media is a great media draw, and there's that. But I think the big questions are questions you'd probably ask, but my questions are a bit different. What I see is these huge global organizations, and TikTok clearly is from Chinese origin. ByteDance's headquarters, their owner is in Shanghai. looked at from the point of view of China, Facebook is this huge global thing that has an American base. And increasingly what you're starting to see is nation states having to deal with entities that are bigger than them, more global than them. And there's a kind of a constant wrestling match going on. Politics, I think, is a sideshow, and I don't think it's serious. Trump tried to ban TikTok and didn't. I don't think anyone really thinks TikTok should be banned because its owners are Chinese. So I don't think that's really what's going on. I think what's really going on is we're trying to renegotiate the relationship between capitalism and nation states as capitalism becomes more and more global and takes the form of these huge.
But that's your old shtick. I don't buy that. I mean, that's too abstract. I mean, you're suggesting that TikTok's more powerful than the American government, or that Facebook's more powerful than the Chinese government. That's not true.
No, it's a bit different.
I mean, these companies are being,
let's imagine,
and they're being controlled. I mean, Facebook, can't compare Facebook, the power of Facebook, with the power of China, or you can't compare the power of TikTok with the power of the US government. They're incomparable.
Well, it's
a nice abstract.
No, you're right.
Maybe
let's not
in the long run, companies can rival governments, but not at the moment. I don't buy it.
Let's not focus on power, because you're right. Social media companies don't have armies and so on. But let's more focus on influence. Because who has more influence, TikTok or the Chinese government? Who has more influence, Facebook or the American government?
It's a meaningless comparison. You suggesting everyone on TikTok or the company TikTok itself?
The whole thing, the people and the entity. Obviously,
then you're including 10 billion people. I mean,
exactly.
The Chinese government has a lot more influence in terms of foreign wars, in terms of opinion, I guess. I don't know. It's not the right question.
No. Look, TikTok's employee base, it was reported a while ago. We discussed it. More and more former employees of Chinese state media, like the Daily Worker and such, are leaving and joining commercial entities like TikTok because they get paid better and it's probably a nicer job. And so little by little, you're getting these very large global players. Now, imagine for a second you are the. Let me ask you this, because this is pertinent. Imagine you're the head of litigation at, let's say, Google.
I can't imagine.
And you look at the list of cases on your plate. Foreign governments will be a lot of them, especially the EU, but not just the EU. Why? Because these players are, the regulatory regime they deal with is hundreds of governments, not one government, hundreds. And so that doesn't happen historically. That hasn't been the case for companies.
Well, it has been the case. In the 1890s, the US government faced down the banks. It's an endless process. It's always the case that governments,
not foreign banks, not foreign banks with a global footprint. That's what's
except that we're talking about. I mean, the China. Say, for example, when, I don't know, the EU goes after Google or Facebook, they're not going after Google and Facebook's behavior in China or Korea or the US. They're going after the way in which Google behaves in Europe. So they're not taking on them globally. We don't have any legal conflicts between the UN and one of these companies. It's not an international battle.
No, but Apple. Let's use Apple because Apple is one of the companies that has not pulled out of China.
Right.
There are many others, but Apple's probably the closest to a fully global company now. And its App Store in China is subject to Chinese government regulation. Its App Store in Japan is subject to Japanese. So one government deals with one company in its own domain. But if you're the company, you're dealing with many governments in many domains. And
that's why they have so many lawyers, and that's why the lawyers are so well paid at these companies.
Yeah, but just think how how bad that is from the point of view of human progress and innovation. Suddenly, the very people who are inventing stuff and making the world better are subject to every government in the world trying to slow them down. It's even worse
That's
than
another, yeah. I mean, that may be. I don't agree with you, but that may be true. But you're getting away from you started this conversation suggesting that there seems to be a growing equality of power between foreign governments or all governments and these tech companies. I simply don't agree. I don't think that.
I didn't say power. You said power. I'm
What
talking
did you
about
say? Influence. I don't know what influence is if it's not power.
Well, power. Well, we can define our terms, but I usually think of power as being executive authority, and clearly these companies don't have that, but they do have economic power to move money around the world. You look at Amazon.
They're very powerful, but they don't compete with the Chinese government or the U.S. government. I mean, maybe they can compete with the Greek government or the Danish government. But no,
I don't mean compete. I'm not suggesting they compete. I'm suggesting that I'm actually suggesting something good is happening here, and that governments are getting in the way of it. So the fact that TikTok is global, originating out of Shanghai, is an example of good things that can be built. I mean, the entertainment quality of TikTok, for those I've uninstalled it because it's too addictive.
But that's a different argument. So what? I mean, I wouldn't. Nobody would disagree with that. I think it's good that certainly you have innovation not just in Silicon Valley but all over the world. What's that got to do with?
So governments and regulators are basically paid the way that Facebook is paying to manipulate negative sentiment in Congress on behalf of Facebook against TikTok. Yeah. This is an example. It's economics as well. No, it's economics.
Right. Well. Government companies will use, and I'm sure that the TikTok lawyers in Beijing or Shanghai are doing the same with respect to American companies. I mean, that's just the nature of things. Everyone uses every advantage they can. I mean, I think it's rather under the belt from Facebook, but it's not surprising.
Yeah, but it's not surprising. However, it symbolizes the moment in history we're sitting in where progress, which is largely global, is held back by local or regional preoccupations. And from a human point of view, take electric vehicles. By the way, this is true in everything: oil, gas. It doesn't. We're talking about tech, but it's true in everything. Look at the Germany-Russia pipeline in the context of the Ukraine war. What you're finding is human need is mediated through national self-interest more and more, and usually national self-interest gets in the way of the right answer.
Yeah, I think you're fitting your global theories into stuff. You can argue this any way you want. I mean, sometimes the government works well in terms of challenging monopolies. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, you're suggesting that every time a government gets involved with a tech company, it's a bad thing. It's stopping progress. I don't think that's true. I mean, you need some regulation. You can't make these kind of generalizations. The idea every time a government is trying to regulate a company, it's against progress. I mean, that's just hardcore libertarianism.
Well, I can't think of a time when governments have tried to regulate something.
Well, then you would be in favor of Standard Oil monopolies. You'd be in favor of Microsoft monopolies. You'd be in favor of, I don't know, Amazon or Google monopolies. I mean, there are times when government needs to get involved, and there are times when they don't. You can't make generalizations. You can't say that every time they get involved, it's against progress.
No, well, I'd say that you're making the generalization by saying you're not being specific. Yeah, you're right. If the government got involved to stop, medical drug prices being so high, I'd be all in favor of it. If the government got involved to support healthcare, I'd be all for it. I'm not all for it when the government gets involved to stop chat services sending messages that are encrypted. So you got to be specific on these things.
I agree. That's exactly what I said. I mean, I didn't make the comment that all government involvement in regulation is a bad thing. I agree. I think sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure on this TikTok front. So you're saying that there should be no government regulation of any of these instant messaging companies?
I don't know what it would be. What would the regulation be?
What are they trying to do? Are they trying to get into the black box of TikTok to know exactly who's sending who what? Or
I don't think there isn't any practical proposal. They're just using TikTok as a battering ram for a nationalist.
I agree. I mean, that's a bad thing. Yeah, and when you got people like Hawley using it as an excuse to bash Chinese innovation and Chinese tech, that's a bad thing. So I agree with you. I think TikTok hatred is often racist, although I think TikTok as a product, there was a piece this morning about there's a whole reaction against TikTok called Be Real.
Be Real is this app that it prompts you once a day to do a front camera, back camera selfie, no matter what you're doing, and it's full of people in their normal life, and it's super boring. And so TikTok Instagram has copied the idea because they copy everything, and now TikTok has launched a new app called TikTok Now that is basically their version of Be Real. And all of the media is saying, well, Be Real is now toast because it's just a feature, and these big guys can easily turn that feature on in their environment.
I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but what wouldn't surprise me is if these public campaigns against TikTok, like, say, for example, all the hatred supposedly against the Queen on TikTok, which I'm sure you could find on Facebook and Twitter as well, is somehow being sponsored or paid for by PR companies hired by Facebook, who are then creating a lot of smoke and mirrors, and then journalists are picking it up. So it's a good warning. When you read stuff, everybody, about TikTok, beware, because there may be some racism behind it. What about on the Twitter whistleblower front, Keith? Has anything actually happened this week?
I think the testimony was, let's go there and we can show it. The testimony, this is the guy, and this is the Wall Street Journal, talking about Pieter Zatko, and his testimony was pretty damning, more damning, I think, than most people anticipated. He was very credible. He had details. There was an 80-page document that you can go and read that sat behind his testimony, and it's fairly clear. And I, this kind of makes sense to me because I've built a bunch of startups that. And almost anyone in Twitter can see almost anyone else's stuff. If you work at Twitter, you can see you have access to things that.
But isn't the issue with the Musk that the argument he's making is the bot argument that Twitter knew about manipulating the numbers, and that's why he shouldn't be required to buy it, because he was buying something that was worth a lot less than Twitter claimed. They weren't revealing their true numbers. Isn't that the core of the argument?
Yeah, that was the initial core. But then when this came up, he got the judge to agree that this could be incorporated into his case. And this is more to do with, there's a clause in the purchase agreement to do with material damage.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, but this relates to that material damage clause. So Musk has got a second string to his bow in arguing that he shouldn't be forced to buy Twitter, basically.
And what do you think is going to happen? I mean, it's such a boring. Who cares anyway? One way or the other, he's not going to buy it. So either he'll get fined or he won't, and that's the end of it.
Yep, I think it's more interesting.
Really. it's just sort of celebrity gossip now. It's not even
the more interesting. Yeah, I agree. The more interesting discussion is, with a Twitter, no matter who owns it, is Twitter. I increasingly think that people's attention is going elsewhere, and the audience for Twitter is being reduced down to, a more intellectual audience. It's like the news stream. On the one side is Twitter, and then the newsletter stream is Substack. And increasingly, we've got live video and audio podcasts around that. And it feels like a whole new era in internet content is emerging. And I do think Twitter's part of that. But I think
although I find that Twitter run a really aggravating and depressing. I mean, I very rarely use it. I used it quite a lot. Maybe 2008, 2009. And what's really weird is I go back now and it's the same people making the same arguments, basically screaming and shouting about something or other. I just don't. What I don't understand is how seemingly smart, productive people can waste their time on it. It's a complete and utter mystery to me. An incredible waste of time and energy and attention. It's pointless. Well, if you're really relying on Twitter to build your brand, then you have a very weak brand. Then you should focus on building your brand better, because if all you're relying on Twitter, you're building that brand on not just weak but non-existent foundations.
Yeah, I don't think it's a brand building platform at all, but I do think it's a decent discovery platform. I follow a lot of people. I bet you find some of your authors there from Keynote.
I don't, because I never use it, but I think one could. So let's move on. Enough Twitter talk for today. One of your essays of the week is an interesting conversation between two, certainly of the smartest guys in Silicon Valley, Sam Altman and Reid Hoffman, talking about OpenAI and AI. What did you find with them? What are they saying that we don't already know on AI?
Well, Sam Altman is the expert, and Reid is really a newbie on AI. So it's kind of interesting because Reid is learning.
He's been in. It's hard. I don't think you really call Reid Hoffman a newbie in AI.
No, he's just started to play with it.
Didn't he invest in OpenAI right from the beginning? Wasn't he one of the investors?
Good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't be surprised.
Anyway, what are they saying, whether or not?
So what they're talking about is that, well, firstly, they're talking about a lot of things we already know, like DALL-E, which is this platform that can turn text into images, is getting more and more.
You had some stuff from Reid Hoffman on DALL-E saying that he was seduced. And you thought that was a good thing. So he's a little bit more than a newbie. But anyway, go on.
And there's another platform. Anyone listening to this should check out Philip Bloom, who's a British videographer, very well known in the videography kind of community. And he's been playing around with a competing technology that also does it. And last week, a company was announced that where they can turn text into video. So they can say, give me a cityscape, give me a river in the background, give me a lot of activity on the street with neon lights. And basically the computer creates a video scene with layers. And
wasn't that something that we talked about that Mike Butcher was playing with a few months ago?
That's right. So what these two talk about is what comes next. And Sam Altman is predicts that the speed at which these computers will be able to create what appear to be real things is going to accelerate in writing, in images, and in video. So it's about the creative computer. So very different to say the deep mind problem-solving computer. But both exist, and AI.
And that's what DALL-E is, right? That's
what DALL-E is.
AI, artistic AI.
So I don't want to, do too much of a spoiler. But
what about the economics of it? Will these be platforms that people use and pay for in that way? How would you imagine?
Creators,
AI economy working.
Creators subscribe to the computer. They pay a monthly fee or a usage-based fee, depending on the business model, and apparently, it speeds a lot of things up. Like if you put the book of one of your authors in and said, "What are the questions I should ask about this?" the computer would tell you its opinion about what the questions would be, and so your research.
I don't know. You'd have to put the book in. You'd have to put them in. You'd have to put the narrative. You'd have to put today's news. I can do it faster on my own.
No, you can't.
Compete well with my brain. What?
No, you would be amazed how your research time would be shrunk. However, your knowledge would be shrunk as well, because the work you put into research grows knowledge. So if a computer tells you the questions, you're just becoming a presenter.
Yeah, and the computer can't. I mean, it can tell you, it can bullet questions, but it can't create the narrative of a conversation. Not yet, anyway.
No, it can.
So it's still way away.
It actually can. It can even guess what the author's answers might be. So if you gave it that problem, no, I mean,
it'd be like listening to Sam Altman and Reid Hoffman talk to one another. Two computers.
Exactly. Why bother? Just have the computer play both roles and see what.
I mean, I wonder whether, do you think Altman and Hoffman are themselves computers? I asked a couple of my guests on Keen on that. Prove to me you're not a computer, and they found it very hard.
Well,
I don't think you're a computer,
that's the Turing test. The Turing test is the
reverse Turing test. It's the reverse Turing test.
Well,
I think that's more interesting than the Turing test itself.
The intelligent creationists believe that we are all computers, and that you look at if you look at quantum computing and biological storage, so that chemicals play the role of zeros and ones. We are all computers. Our brain is the central processing unit, and we're basically, our skin and bones is the robotic parts. And so in a sense, we are all computers, but we're clever computers. And most of these computers are not as clever as us, but that's changing. And so this conversation is
you and I, Keith, are particularly clever, aren't we?
Yeah, we're super clever.
We're like superior computers. We're like,
that's why we're spending our Saturday talking to you.
We're made by Apple, not by like Dell or Google or something. Why does Google, by the way, produce such shitty computers?
It's a cultural thing. If you really want to understand Google, you got to understand Larry and
Now
Sergey.
You're sounding like a critic of TikTok, a cultural thing. You're not going to blame the Chinese, are you, Keith?
No, I'm going to. Companies reflect their founders. And Larry and Sergey are.
They don't make computers.
They have certain beliefs.
Okay, well, let's move on. Larry and Sergey, pull up your socks and make better computers. What about Hopin? That's come up from time to time. It seems to be sort of a symbol of the ups and downs of tech. Interesting essay of the week suggesting that when we look at Hopin, we can learn a lot about the challenges and opportunities of what you call hypergrowth.
Yeah. So hypergrowth is actually a phrase coined by Reid Hoffman. He's a fan of it. And this is two employees.
Is that the Reid Hoffman who doesn't know much about AI?
Exactly. So I call it Hopin, you call it Hopin.
I call it Hoffman.
It's a UK company that you will remember was focused on virtual conferences during the pandemic.
My nephew
raised a lot of money.
The LSE, I think, was somehow involved with them. I think he worked with the founder.
Right. So basically grew very fast, raised a lot of money, made lots of acquisitions, which we've covered on this show. And this is
mostly good or bad.
And most good. And this is basically two guys talking about what a train wreck it is. To be inside that process. So it's not a positive story; it's a negative story. It would reinforce your skepticism about fast growth innovation.
But to be, and you don't need me to defend big tech or fast growth, but I mean, some companies do this right. I mean, Facebook went through its own period of hyper growth. It acquired Instagram or Google and YouTube. I mean, it can be done right. You don't have to fuck up hyper growth, do you?
No, it's all about it's about the quality of people.
And has that been the problem with Hopin? Not very good people?
Well, what tends to happen in very early startups that grow super fast is the leadership leads but doesn't manage. Leadership's a lot easier than management. For example, I suck at, I think, at management, but I'm pretty decent at leadership. So as things grow, you need to put a team around. Look at NASA and the hydrogen leak on the rocket ship. That's all about just process and people. And so bad stuff happens if you don't have fantastic teams that are given authority and have the skills to carry out tasks. And in an early startup, that's hard to do, super hard to do.
Are there companies you think over the last 3 years, okay, Hopin is screwed up, and that's not really surprising? It always seemed their business, and not their business model, but what they did was a bit thin and uninteresting. Are there companies over the last 3 years that have done well? That are stronger
Zoom,
today?
I would say Zoom did very well.
Zoom's done right. What have Zoom done correctly?
I think the Zoom. Well, the Zoom founder, who is Chinese by birth, is just super good at management. So he's not really an outward-facing leader. He's more of a manager, and I think growth needs management more than it needs leadership.
What does that tell us about Chinese leaders, Keith?
They're typically quite good. I mean, Chinese universities produce very efficient professionals.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful making generalizations about which races or genders or religions make better leaders or visionaries. I mean, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. What about the news of the week? It's been another bad week on Wall Street, slightly less dramatic, but still pretty miserable. How is this playing out in the VC space? This is your area. Is it beginning to drip down into investment in the VC industry?
Yeah, big time. The amount of capital being deployed has dropped by 50% probably. The only stage of startups that are still getting funded at the rate they were last year is the seed and A round stage, the early stage. But the Bs have slowed down a lot, and Cs and Ds massively.
And B is your area. That's what you're focused on in your new business.
B's my area. I've been working super hard on SignalRank, and we've now got this algorithm that produces something called the SignalRank Index. And the SignalRank Index is all of the B rounds that our algorithm would have recommended going back to 2012. It's kind of a DALI backtest on venture investing. And it spits out 886 companies that we would have invested in at the B. 233 of them would be unicorns. And the growth in the money, that if you would have done all of them, is about 16 times your money.
So are you suggesting that it's a good time now to invest? I mean, you would say that because you're in the business now, but are there real bargains to be had, do you think?
There are. There's never, startups and bargain, the words don't really go together. But are there good companies that are now cheaper than they were a year ago? Yes, absolutely.
Which sectors in particular do you think is hot?
Crypto and AI are the two biggest. Fintech as well.
Well, AI, everyone's an AI company, aren't they?
Yeah. No, they're not. Just a minute, and I'll show you. Somebody's asking me a question. So yeah, let me share my screen. So this is a sneak peek of what the back office of SignalRank, and we track the number of funding rounds by year. You can see that last year was 53,000. Now it's 32. But if you zoom down to B rounds, which is this table here, there's about 1,000 less B rounds at this point in the year than were in the whole of last year. So let's say it's going to be quite a bit lower. But look, the median amount of money being raised is the same.
So you're saying that one of the news pieces is a bull case for fintech. In which areas in particular? Not just crypto, generally fintech, because not all fintech is crypto.
Actually, I would distinguish between them. The fintech is things like challenger banks, insurance, buy now, pay later. There's lots of different.
That sector's getting really badly hit, isn't it?
Yeah, Firma's quite down on its stock. But, the reason fintech attracts money is because there's a lot of money in finance, and tech can steal those markets at much lower cost bases. So, it shocks me that somebody hasn't come and in all of the sectors, like, I don't know about you, I pay my car insurance. It's a lot of money. It's highly available to be disrupted, but there's no kind of iPhone app that does my car insurance as well as, let's say, Farmers does. So it's undisrupted. Same with all insurance is really fairly undisrupted. So I think there's a lot of fintech future. Blockchain is a optional part of fintech. So it could be done on blockchain or it might not. It's interesting enough, Fidelity this week announced a blockchain that's going to let normal investors invest in Fidelity assets using the blockchain as the ledger. So the blockchain and fintech kind of come together a lot, but there's a lot of pure blockchain plays. We've talked about.
And then you're saying so fintech you think is an opportunity, but one of the crisis verticals is healthcare. You say that venture healthcare funding has fallen 42%. That's astonishing. I would have thought that would have been one of the blue chip sectors.
You would think so. But for whatever reason, healthcare is high risk because there's a lot of regulatory elements to a healthcare startup. He has to get approved and so on. So the timelines tend to be very long. It depends which segment. So like therapeutics and discovering new drugs for viruses is getting more attention. But anything that, anything that isn't, that has regulatory constraints, money doesn't want to go long. It wants quick outcomes. And I think that's...
Yeah, well, we know that. And one company that always wants quick outcomes is Andreessen Horowitz. And we questioned, Keith, over the last few weeks, their investment in Adam Neumann's new venture, both morally and perhaps in economic terms. We have some clarity on that now. They're getting in the landlord business. They're going into real estate. What does that say?
Well, it's probably quite smart of them, actually. Everyone was shocked that they wrote a $350 million check to Adam Neumann's new company. It turns out that a lot of that money it gives them ownership over properties, therefore is not at risk. So it's probably quite a smart structuring deal.
Although it's not,
and it goes back.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a particularly interesting use of their resources, is it?
Well, they're buying equity in his company. And so if his company gets big, they'll make a lot of money, but they're supporting the risk by having being able to take the property in a bad outcome. So now they couldn't have done this
then, right? They
couldn't have done it.
Grows, if the company grows, they're going to make money. If it collapses, then they'll just walk off with the real estate, and they have securities. They're not even an investor here. Are they taking? Where's the gamble for them?
Well, that's the interesting thing. They stopped being a venture capital firm. We talked about that. They're now a registered investment advisor, and so they can do things like this. And all they're really doing is what a bank would do, which is making sure that their risk is mitigated by some asset.
Right.
And,
Which is interesting because then, as you say there, but they still are a VC. I mean, part of the company, they're not just doing bank-like deals now.
Well, they do venture-like deals, but they're not legally a VC anymore. They're legally an registered investment advisor. It's a different structure, and the rules they have to work by are different. They're more regulated. VCs are not so regulated. RIAs are. So they're more regulated, but they have more flexibility in what they can do.
So if you want if you want a small loan and your bank manager won't give it to you, go and talk to Mark Andreessen or Brad Horowitz. Finally, Keith, our favorite part of the show, startup of the week and tweet of the week. What's the startup of the week?
There's only one this week. It's got to be Figma. Figma is a cloud-based design platforms for designing apps and websites.
Yeah.
You can design anything in it, but it's cloud-based. And Adobe paid $20 billion for it, apparently 50 times its revenue. So you know, if you do a startup and you get to, I think they're at about 50 million in revenue. If somebody will pay you 50 times your revenue, that's basically 50 years worth of future revenue.
Adobe, after this announcement, the Adobe stock dropped 15%, so the market wasn't very keen on this deal.
Yeah, but that was also
Adobe panicking, and they see the writing on the wall in terms of the future of their business and model.
You know, it's an interesting question. Adobe is one of the oldest companies in Silicon Valley, going back to the 1980s. It was in desktop publishing, and it used to do shrink wrap software, which is you bought a box with books in and discs. And the modern version of that is you download the software, but it's still pretty much the same. Adobe Premiere, Photoshop.
Yeah, I like that stuff. I use the Premiere and the Lightroom.
Yeah,
easy to use and pretty well priced.
Super good software, but you know, I have a subscription to it, to Creative Cloud, which is what it's called, and I think I pay like $500 a year for a subscription, so it's not cheap. Now Figma, by contrast, you're paying, I don't know, $10 a month or something for equally good quality, and you don't download anything. It's all cloud-based, but the functionality is very high. It's not.
I've got the door. You continue talking, Keith. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Okay, so basically, Figma was eating Adobe's lunch when it comes to number of users. Adobe has a competing product called XD, which is a good product, and it makes total sense to me. In fact, it's not unlike the time when Facebook acquired Instagram. It makes total sense for them to go and acquire. After all, why wouldn't they? And the market correction, I don't think has anything to do with it, really. Adobe announced its earnings the same day that it announced the acquisition, and the CEO had to report that Adobe missed its numbers, and that led to its stock going down. Some of that may be accounted for by the price they paid for Figma, but mostly it was due to their revenue going down. I heard an interview with the Adobe CEO afterwards, making the point that this acquisition will end up being accretive only in 3 years. So some of the correction was.
So who should we applaud here? The Adobe people or the Figma people, or both, or neither?
Mainly the Figma people, and then a little bit the Adobe people for having. I mean, it takes serious cojones to spend $20 billion on an acquisition. So, I mean,
presumably there was a good market. I mean, someone was bidding them up. It wouldn't have been just them, do you think?
It wouldn't have been just them, but the fact, you know, it's a little bit like when Zuckerberg paid roughly this amount for WhatsApp. It needs to be a game changer. It was for Facebook. It probably will be for Adobe, because this should be a transition to the cloud for them. Lightroom, the thing you like, there's 2 versions. One you install on your computer, the other one is in the cloud. I use the computer-based one because I'm, you know, old-fashioned in that way. But the cloud one is super good, and that is probably the future direction.
So Adobe is increasingly becoming a big data company like everybody else.
Yep.
And privacy issues and regulation and all this stuff is going to affect them as much as everyone else.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Well, it's good to have more companies, more the merrier in this space. And finally, Keith, tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week is from a friend of mine, Fred Destan, who is a very well-known Belgian-born venture capitalist who lives in the UK. He comments on the fact that Goldman Sachs, in a model portfolio to wealthy people, suggested only 18.5% should go to private assets. And of the 100 million, only 600,000 should go into venture capital. Fred's a venture capitalist, so he's opining on, how small venture capital's portion of that model portfolio is.
Where should the rest go?
Well, so private wealth typically is seeking to preserve value, and so it tends not to be very risk-seeking. So, it goes into dividend-paying companies, for example. It goes into property, things that are solid.
And Newman's new thing.
Yeah, and this guy, Julian, I don't know how to pronounce the French there. Etaille, says that when he was at JP Morgan, venture capital was considered non-investable asset class because of the illiquidity and performance risk. And then this guy breaks it all down into where it all goes globally and into what assets. So it's a good thread. It relates to a McKinsey report that talks about where people put money.
So the broader takeaway from this is, if you've got $100 million, don't put much of it into venture capital funds.
Put it into Signal Rank is what I would suggest.
All of it.
That's just me.
All of it, Keith.
All of
the
it.
Whole 100 mil.
Signal Rank could invest probably up to $500 million a year very effectively, and most likely the returns that you would look at 10 years later are going to be in the 10 to 20x range.
Well,
So
there
if
you have
that's
it. If you've got $100 million lying around, burning a hole in your pocket, put into Keith's new venture, Signal Rank. That was the week, Keith, for September the 17th. Next week, we'll be back at our regular Friday time. So we'll see you all next Friday, September 23rd. Have a great week, Keith. And invest your $100 million in anything until talking to me. We'll talk again next week.
Thank you, Andrew. And we've rabbited on for 48 minutes, longer than normal. So apologies to all your listeners.
And time to end it. Go on. End it, Keith.
I've got